Hi everyone. This is Fionapollo and I do art commentary, and today I'm not in the best of moods. I've had a pretty bad couple of weeks, and the topic of today is going to be my way of finding an outlet, but also as an excuse to rant on just how ridiculously petty some situations can be. To preface this video, some of you may be aware that I talked about some Vivziepop allegations last year regarding the work environment within her self-made animation studio, SpindleHorse. Since then, I've had a few people come to me asking to take another look into the situation now that time has passed. And since then, some evidence was also produced in order to try and bolster the claims made against Vivzie and the studio. But here's the thing, that evidence still doesn't concretely prove what was being insisted upon. It was unfounded, so I never made a follow-up to my original video because with that in mind, there was no point. Nothing has changed, Viv is still innocent until proven guilty. Let me make this very clear because some people still seem to be twisted on it. As a person, I am a completely neutral party when it comes to Vivziepop, and my only concern is the effects that situations like these affect bystanders such as other workers within the animation industry and even within SpindleHorse who have no involvement in these incidents. I don't love Vivzie and I don't hate her because I don't know her. She is some random stranger on the internet doing her own thing, and I will admit that I do find a lot of what she's achieved very inspiring. But it also seems to be the reason for a lot of the venom spat at her because not everyone always agrees with her decisions or conduct. Do I agree with everything she does? Of course I don't. But I also don't think she's a monster because all the things I've heard about her that have been framed as grievances, with very few exceptions, to me just make her sound human. The things I disagree with are also some of the most mundane points, they're not even serious offences. Like having too many explicit jokes in an episode of Hell of a Boss for someone else's liking is not grounds for a character attack. With that said, this video is a look into some additional information that was given after the events were initially covered, and of the knock-on effects surrounding them and how it hurts the people both involved with SpindleHorse and who work in animation at large. So if you're interested in what you're hearing, then please keep listening and consider liking and subscribing. I talk a lot about situations within the animation industry, as well as webcomics, fandoms, and the art world in general. Please note that I am one person creating these videos on a relatively tight schedule, so I'm not always able to catch every piece of information. If there are any additional points you feel I missed, feel free to leave them in the comments. Let's begin. Part 1. Erin Frost. So this section will be purely looking at the aftermath of the incident surrounding Erin Frost's accusations towards SpindleHorse. To kick things off, for anyone who hadn't seen my previous video on this situation, a former employee, Erin Frost, accused several members of the studio of unprofessionalism, favoritism, bullying, and threats of blacklisting. When that video was released, no actual evidence had yet been provided regarding all of these accusations that had been put forth. Sometime afterwards though, Erin did provide some pieces of evidence, including screenshots of past Discord conversations meant to support their claims. Except they didn't. The majority of the screenshots I saw were communications between Erin and other SpindleHorse employees that didn't give many hints towards what Erin was publicly inferring. Like, actually take a look at these, pause to read. But to me, this just reads the same as how some of my colleagues talk to me through Teams. These just look like regular communications between work colleagues, emphasis on work colleagues, not friends. You might be friendly to people you work with, but that's not what's bringing you together. Some of these messages might come across as to the point or a bit cold, but these people aren't your buddies, and they want to get shit done just as much as you probably do, and especially if there is a deadline looming, it's not uncommon for someone to make a judgment call and assign work to someone else if they feel that you might be overfaced. It's also not surprising if they are speaking a bit more pointedly should that be the case. Like, yeah, maybe Sam could have been a bit nicer, but she's also the background lead and there was a deadline. I can only assume that Sam is probably just as stressed as Erin was, maybe more so considering she is managing a bunch of other people making sure that they're doing their jobs. Is that an excuse if there is any potential misconduct? Of course not, but it's not showing across in these screenshots. I think there's a kind of expectation, especially when a lot of animation workers come together through online means, for them to maintain a very happy and bubbly demeanor even outside of their public presence. After all, no one wants to approach or work with someone who comes across as an arsehole. But the thing is, there is a multitude of different ways that someone might communicate and even more reasons as to why they might be. Some people just don't gel well, some might be blunt in text, some might be fine in voice chats, or vice versa. Like, I genuinely don't mean to come off as condescending or excusing anything that might be going on behind the scenes, but colleagues are not responsible for giving constant reassurance unless they are specifically training you, and I don't know if that's the case here because I don't know the inner workings of everyone's roles within SpindleHorse. A job in animation is still a job, and some people just want to show up, get their work done, and go home. And considering how physically demanding the job has gotten in recent years, and also the fact that this team is constantly facing harassment every single day from rabid fans and haters, Can you blame them? That said, the screenshots Erin gave were still very much open to interpretation, and some chose to believe Erin's side. And I'm not going to sit here and say that's wrong, because it isn't. Choosing to believe a potential victim is sometimes necessary because of an already existing power imbalance that may be present. And it's also not uncommon for solid evidence to not be available with situations such as these. In this case, people were already willing to believe Vivzie and Sam were innocent over Erin being truthful purely due to her notoriety and influence on people as the creator of SpindleHorse, Hell of a Boss, and Has Been Hotel. Things were already stacked in her favour, and the reason people were so willing to even listen to Erin's side is because Erin appeared to have virtually nothing to gain from the incident, which led people to believe that they were coming from a genuine place. But again, this is all subject to interpretation given the evidence that has been provided. All I'm saying here is that these Discord messages are not incriminating enough in any way towards either party, but we still don't know the full story. We don't know what was said in any voice calls and such, for example, and whether things might have been different. So it may very well be that some of what Erin experienced is as bad as we may fear, but with no way to back that up, we just can't take Erin at their word. Overall, I'm incredibly sorry to say that if this is to be used as evidence of misconduct within SpindleHorse, it's not substantial enough to be a legitimate claim. Everything Erin showed within these screenshots are not damning examples of dismissal or bullying or anything like that. It just comes across as colleagues wanting to get things done. They're not insulting you, demeaning you, and the one screenshot with Adam literally shows them willingly engaging in a call which you supposedly requested and taking the time to read over a document you sent. And that screenshot even made it seem like things ended on good footing. I'm fully sympathetic to any potential negative experiences that Erin may have had at the studio, such as overworking, struggling with mental health, and so on. Feeling overwhelmed and like you aren't receiving enough support at your first industry job must be excruciating. But these examples are not good enough if you truly believed there were systemic issues within the studio and wanted to bring awareness to them. These screenshots don't prove anything, and it only gets worse from here. Following Erin's attempts at backing up their claims, as we mentioned, some people chose to believe them, which again, I don't believe is a bad thing in itself, and I commend people who believe they are supporting a potential victim who is struggling against a notable power imbalance. And I can understand on that front why these claims have reached the level of notoriety they have by virtue of people sharing Erin's story. However, despite me being sympathetic to it in that respect, what I absolutely cannot condone is people fabricating incidents and then using those to tamper with a legitimate resource that is used by professionals in the animation field to unjustly smear SpindleHorse's name. Part 2. The Overspill. So for those who aren't privy to some of the unofficial inner practices among animation professionals, there happens to be a free and open source spreadsheet that is operated by people who work within the animation industry that kind of works similarly to a job review website. Think Glassdoor, but exclusively for animation. This spreadsheet is used by animators to anonymously submit their own experiences of working different jobs for different studios and are able to submit information such as job title, place of work, salary, whether they would recommend it, and a short blurb of their overall thoughts and experiences, which is then recorded on the spreadsheet for other people to look at and assess as to whether they want to try submitting a job application to specific studios. Where this connects with SpindleHorse and Erin is when several people, including one individual known on X-Twitter as Animation Callout, admitted to submitting false negative reviews about SpindleHorse as a way to tank its reputation among animation workers and give off the impression that Vivzie is some kind of tyrant. So I know that fanbases can sometimes get out of hand and do really dumb things, trust me, I was into Homestuck, but this especially for some reason has just really struck me for how needlessly malicious and stupid it is, because you're not just targeting one person or making a nuisance out of yourself, you're creating an uncomfortable environment for a group of people who have done nothing wrong besides work for a particular studio, and also inconvenience many more when it comes to trying to evaluate which studios are in fact bad places to work and which ones are actually fine. In a time when people are already anxious enough with strikes, layoffs, and a refusal on the side of large corporations to concede less than 1% of their wealth towards ensuring that the people who keep the industry running can afford to live, not just survive and struggle, to be so petty as to tamper with something that many people might rely on to find work or navigate their way through an industry as a newcomer, for example, is really just such a mean-spirited thing to do. Like, this is genuinely something that has real-life consequences. That spreadsheet can be vital for a few people looking for work, and work right now is very scarce, or at the least unstable. And I understand that by virtue of the spreadsheet being anonymous and allowing anyone to submit a review, this already means that any review that has been recorded can potentially be false, but for the most part, the overwhelming majority of people who really knew about it prior to this incident were people who worked in the industry itself, not terminally online randos. And to be doing all this because of one person is honestly just so bad backwards, because who are you helping? Who are you actually helping? Because when you look at the current situation around SpindleHorse, while indie animation is not perfect, it is at least consistent and thriving in the face of strike action across the entertainment sphere. And it's also worth noting that the studio which has greenlit Has-Been Hotel, A24, is one of the only studios that is able to carry on business as usual during the strikes because they agreed to the union's demands almost immediately. So to cast doubt among people under the guise of a toxic work environment can also be potentially damaging towards A24 as well, through guilt by association. No one you are claiming to support will benefit from this because you've basically sabotaged an important resource put together by regular people that the people you are claiming to support also likely use. And you've also thrown the integrity of said resource itself into question. This spreadsheet isn't created by companies. Companies hate stuff like this, where honest feedback rules over undeserved praise. If anything, this whole incident feels like some ridiculous, spy op or something. And it's not just SpindleHorse that will be affected by this, because this is only going to make it even harder for people to know who and what to trust in an industry that is already prone to strenuous and even sometimes abusive conditions. And just to add insult to injury, I've been made aware of some transphobia allegations against Vivzie being collated into a Google Doc. And while I can see why people would be upset about what was said there, within the document are screenshots of some of the falsified studio reviews, which causes me to question the validity of almost everything else within that doc. I feel like I legitimately can't trust anything people say about this girl, good or bad. I'm not going to comment on the transphobia claims because I'm not an authority on that. It's not my place to dictate what is considered transphobic or acceptable. Ask a trans person. But yeah. Taking Erin out of the equation here, because these kinds of incidents have been happening way before Erin came on the scene. I could understand this better if Vivzie was like Justin Roiland and had actually been proven to be a problematic person, but she's nowhere near that level. Oh, what? She makes furry OCs? Furry OCs are not always inappropriate just because there is a subcategory that are. She made questionable art years ago. I hate to tell you this, but almost everyone working in animation has drawn inappropriate art to the point where Disney has an entire vault full of it, and a lot of it is far worse than what I've seen Viv being called out for. She makes a show about demons in hell who swear like sailors and use too many dick jokes. So what? There are hundreds of animated shows like that. The only difference is that Hell of a Boss is much more accessible, leading to much more conflict and debate among viewers and fans instead of limiting that debate to people who own a particular streaming service. I am all for analysing and evaluating potential causes and effects of certain content and actions that allude to questionable or problematic acts. It's some of my most popular content on this channel, but at the end of the day, analysing or discussing potentialities does not equal condemning such content, and I am frankly so sick to death of the amount of needless policing and virtue signalling surrounding such instances, especially when it's surrounding cartoons of all things. And I can't help but feel guilty sometimes for potentially adding to that, but I also don't think nothing should be looked at critically. I just also don't think people should be so obsessed with it that they think they are justified in meddling with people's lives. I don't know, guys. I've looked through a lot of controversies that Vivzie has supposedly been involved in. I've watched video after video, seen post after post, to try and gauge what I actually think of this person. And what I think is that she is ultimately a normal individual who does both good and bad things sometimes, who is doing things that some people both idolize, maybe a bit too much sometimes, but also is consistently hounded on because her work and her achievements in her chosen field are so prolific. And she is basically placed on this pedestal where every misstep or misinterpretation is magnified by 1,000. I'm not saying that people can't talk about this stuff or support a person who they feel is either in the right or who is being unfairly dogpiled on. That is your right as a free person to make that call, but I honestly just wish people would stop and think for a moment about how their actions could affect more than just one or two specific individuals. That's just, that's all I ask. That is all I'm asking. Part 3. The state of being. I think what really upsets me about this situation is that from the perspective of a newcomer to the industry who is finding themselves to be absolutely overwhelmed with the heat of expectations, I can see some of where Erin is coming from. Doing typical industry animation work is hard. It's really fucking hard. It's hard to break into, it's hard to keep up with, and it's hard to not feel like you're just not trying hard enough because everyone else is also trying to convince themselves that this is a dream job that you should happily keep doing forever in spite of all the negatives. And sometimes, in the face of all that, you just want other people who are in your situation to extend a bit of kindness. But over the past few years, that illusion has slowly been breaking away and people are realizing that animation is just like any other industry full of regular people who are working to live. But the constant assurance that you are living the dream has deluded people up to this point into believing that being a part of such an industry is a higher reward than being fed or keeping your lights on. Me and a friend were doing our best to pay bills during 2020 by taking on a bunch of odd jobs for people's passion projects, and it was so difficult to balance your time to meet deadlines deadlines, to manage expectations, all for paltry pay, mind you. And for many, it's just too much. I eventually backed out, and now I do a regular job with YouTube on the side because that level of dedication and stress is not something that everyone can handle. And even the ones who can, they can't do it forever, not at the rate that studios are expecting right now. And the hard work and undeniable talent that comes about has also dazzled animation appreciators, particularly younger fans, into believing the industry is a lot more glamorous than it actually is. And when it isn't, all hell breaks loose. It's such a polarizing experience seeing how hard certain people are working to keep themselves afloat, alongside groups of people who become way too invested and cause more harm than good. I understand why situations like this arise, but man, if it doesn't just make you want to wish you could wave a magic wand and fix things, I wish I could help people in an industry I'm heavily invested in myself, but I want to do it in a way that matters and benefits them, not in a way that not only doesn't work, but also attempts to drag certain individuals down who you don't think deserve to be a part of it, rather than lifting everyone up. The online cartoon community overall really just needs to learn to chill out. The spreadsheet thing, in the grand scheme of things, is a small footnote. Like I said, I had a bad week, and it was just the straw that broke the camel's back, you know? I don't even know what I'm trying to say anymore, but if you made it this far, then thank you so much for watching. And if you like what I had to say, then please consider liking and subscribing. It would be nice to hear what people think of this, whether you agree or disagree with what I've said. Any feedback is welcome, just keep it civil. Please stay safe everyone, and I will speak to you soon. Bye!